So, hi, thank you for joining us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you're located. Um, and Meg just started recording. Just a heads up to keep yourself muted. And if you have questions, just put them in the chat box. We'll address any questions at the end. But yeah, thank you for joining. My name is Chloe Hundelt. I'm the grant specialist at NACD, and I am presenting today on our new program, the Historically Underserved Farmer to Farmer Outreach Grants Program, which is administered on behalf of the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division. So quick agenda for our presentation today. We have our welcome, which we've already covered. Then we'll get into the scope and objectives of the program. We'll talk a little bit about outcomes and outputs, the difference between the two, and the requirements for this program. We'll discuss quality assurance plans, which are a requirement for this program as well. Then we'll get into the application process and the timeline. We'll briefly discuss help and resources for applying to the program. And then lastly, we'll answer any questions that you have. So again, if you have any questions throughout, please put those questions into the end. I'm sorry, into the chat. We'll address those at the end. Okay. So scope of this project. So the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division is working with 4 different partners to solicit proposals that provide for Native American and historically underserved farmer-to-farmer outreach and on-the-ground projects that mitigate hypoxic conditions in the Gulf of Mexico. So there's 4 different pass-through entities that are working on awarding grants for this program. So that's Winrock, which is in the blue, NACD, which is us in the purple, NASDA in green, and the Iowa Department of Natural Resources in orange, which is obviously just in Iowa. So if you are located in a region that's outside of the purple region, you can also look on our website to see the partners that are associated or that are putting on their own grant applications, and you can access their web pages there. So eligible applicants for this program are conservation districts, respective state associations or state agencies, as long as the conservation district is still engaged at the local level, resource conservation and development councils, and Indian tribal governments or intertribal consortia. So the regions that NACD is covering for this program are Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, and then portions of Florida, Georgia, and New Mexico and Colorado, as you can see in the map. We also are really valuing partnerships for this program. So if you are not one of the eligible applicants that I had just listed, I would recommend reaching out to conservation districts in your area that you could potentially partner with. So objectives of this program are to work directly with Native American and or historically underserved producers on innovative techniques, methods, or approaches that reduce non-point source pollution in the Gulf of Mexico and also increase sustainability and resiliency of their operations. So again, it's important that we leverage partnerships for this program. So I have a link here for this partner contact form. So if you are a partner, a potential partner, not necessarily an eligible applicant, meaning not a conservation district, you can fill out this form and we'll get your information and we can kind of help link you to any conservation districts that are in your area that might be applying for this program. It's important just for me too to underscore the benefit to historically underserved producers that we're seeking through these projects. So the objective of that is intended to advance equity, and it's part of this presidential administration's Justice 40 goal. So the federal government has made it a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow directly towards disadvantaged communities. So this is kind of part of that. Other objectives are to collect and analyze the data in order to demonstrate the results of our funded projects, which is where the quality assurance piece comes in, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then another objective is to disseminate those results to the community in order to inform future conservation practices and expand adoption of cost-effective and sustainable approaches to non-point source pollution. So applications have to include at least one of the following: water quality initiatives, habitat restoration initiatives, or sustainable forest management initiatives. So there's a ton of examples in the RFA. Just a couple quick examples: water quality initiatives could be nutrient reduction, year-round ground cover to limit erosion, planting field buffers. Some examples of habitat restoration initiatives could be riparian zone improvements, restoration or protection of wildlife corridors. Let's see, conservation of perennial flooded grasslands and forests. Those are just a couple examples. Again, there's a huge list on the RFA, and then a couple examples of sustainable forest management could be utilizing sustainable forestry practices in order to protect water quality and habitat. Also improving sustainable forestry practices through training and education. Just a couple examples of these kind of technical pieces that are required for these projects. And then in terms of the partnerships and outreach aspects, applications must include both of the following, which is collaboration and sustainable and resilient agricultural operations. So the RFA also includes examples for both of these, but just to give you a couple for collaboration, that could be some of your partners replicating existing successes in watersheds in order to build that stakeholder and farmer capacity through, for example, technical trainings and outreach. Maybe you give awards to local farmers and organizations that demonstrate those techniques. So just different ways that you're working with partners and engaging partners in order to share successes and increase those successes across those partnerships. And sustainable and resilient agricultural operations mean doing things like identifying vulnerabilities to climate-related risks, and exploring social, economic, cultural, and technical implementation challenges that might exist, and opportunities to make those changes to the way that you're farming and your watershed in order to ensure long-term sustainability. So again, the RFA has a ton of examples. I just want to give a brief overview of some of those activities, but applications must have both of those pieces. So let's talk a little bit about outputs versus outcomes. So beginning with outputs, these are what's known as deliverables, or you might have heard them called metrics. So they refer to an activity or an effort that's where an actual product is produced. So those must be measurable. They must be related to an environmental goal. So you'll have to list your anticipated outputs in your pre-application. And then in the final application is when you'll have to actually nail down some numbers of your target metrics and what your quarterly milestones will be. So the RFA includes some examples of technical and social outputs, but just to give a couple examples, technical outputs might be like acres restored, or miles restored. And then social outputs might be, number of underserved producers reached, things like that. So it's kind of those immediate activities that you're doing on the project. Outcomes, on the other hand, are the results of those activities, essentially. So what are the effects of carrying out those activities through your project? Outcomes could be qualitative. They can be environmental, behavioral, health related, or programmatic, but they also must be quantifiable in some way. They can also be short-term, intermediate, or long-term. So something to think about when you're thinking about your quality assurance plan, which again, I'll get into shortly, but it's important to think about when you're developing metrics and outcomes that you have a plan for collecting and validating your data, including what methods you'll be using to collect that data, both for your outputs and your outcomes, and how the data that you collect will inform your decisions. So again, in your pre-application, you'll list the anticipated outcomes. In the final application is when you'll include those target metrics with the exact numbers that you're proposing in the quarterly milestones. So continuing on outcomes, technical outcomes will need to include one of the following. So the acres or the type of habitat that's enhanced or restored over the life of the project, and the improvement of at least one water quality parameter in a water body or a segment of water. So that could be nutrients, turbidity, TSS, etc. Lots of options there. I think I might have made it a little confusing when I was saying outputs could be acres restored. That would be number of acres that you're working on for your output, while your outcome would be the acres that are actually restored. So you'd have to show some kind of improvement that existed on those acres based on your activity. Other technical outcomes could be pollutant load reductions and or number of pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, or sediment or discharge avoided. So other options that aren't related to the two that are required. So the acres or the improvement of one water quality parameter are required, but you can have additional technical outcomes. And then you'll also be required to have some social outcomes, but there's lots of options for those. So it could be the examples listed here, improvements made to environmental programs, requirements, or policies to better protect public health, or improve collective knowledge about more efficient farming practices that result in reduced non-point source pollution. So you could accomplish that perhaps by surveys that you give to your participants or your partners to show improved knowledge. Lots of options there, but you'll have to show in some way how social outcomes were impacted by your project. Quality assurance plan. So each awardee must have a subaward quality assurance plan. The quality assurance plan serves as a blueprint for how you'll collect your data, how you'll validate your data, ensure that it's high quality data. NACD will have an umbrella quality assurance plan that we develop with the EPA. And then all of our subawardees or our grantees will also be required to have their own specific plans that are applicable to their specific project activities. So you'll have to describe an approach for developing your plan in your final application. And then after your project is selected for award, you'll have to develop that plan within 45 days of the award. So we do have some guidance found here, and I might not have mentioned this before, but all of these slides are also available on our website on the homepage for this program. But if you have any trouble finding it, please contact me and I can help you find it. Also, something to note is that your plan will have to be approved before you initiate any data collection. So you'll just have to clarify in your application if you need an expedited time frame for that. So if you have like a seasonal need to collect data right away, please let us know so that we can make sure that we get your plans approved quickly so that you can collect the data. And we'll also work with you to finalize and approve your quality assurance plans if you have any questions or concerns about that. So just basic elements, I'll go through this pretty quickly for a quality assurance plan. Who will use the data? What are the goals of the project? What decisions will be made from the data that's obtained? Where, how, when will the information be acquired? So what is your methodology? How are you collecting samples? How are you handling the samples? How are you analyzing the data? How are you quantifying your data? What are the instruments you're using to collect your data? And then you also want to talk about what problems might arise, what actions that you might take to mitigate risk from those potential problems. So you'll have to have a plan to address those risks, and type of data, quantity of data, and what's the level of quality the data needs to be at in order to support a decision. And then again, how you'll analyze the data, how you'll report the data. So there's a lot of pieces to this. I know it can look really big, but again, we can help walk you through it. And this is all also listed in the RFA. So let's just walk through the application process. This is our second applicant webinar on March 21st. The pre-applications are due on April 21st. And essentially a pre-application is just to check for eligibility, and then we're going to circulate things, applications out to potential partners. As I had said, that partnership form, if we have partners that are interested, we might share applications with partners in the area to see where we can kind of start to form those collaborations on these projects. And then final applications will be due June 9th. Between June 12th and August 18th is when we'll be evaluating final applications, and then we will notify the selected applicants on August 31st. Final award will be on October 30th. Just a couple notes about the pre-application versus the final application. The pre-application is, like I had said, circulated to encourage match and partnerships, but it won't actually be evaluated. But the final application will be evaluated based on the criteria that's in the RFA. The pre-application will not require identifying risks or barriers to your mitigation plans, but the final application will require you to identify those risks. The pre-application, you'll kind of describe the types of partners you're looking to attract and the anticipated role you envision for them. In the final application, you'll have to have that list of partners finalized. For your pre-application, you'll describe your outputs and your outcomes, but you won't have to create that quality assurance plan yet. In the final application, you will have to create that plan for developing your quality assurance plan and disseminating the results of the data that you collect. And then in the pre-application, you're not required to submit a budget worksheet or match information, but you will be required to do that for your full application. And just to note, matching contributions are not required for these projects, but they will be considered when we evaluate projects. So having a match would be a plus, but it's not required. Little information about funding. So the individual awards will be between $75,000 and $250,000. So we'll award about 10 to 36 grants in total. The total funding amount available is $2.7 million. There's no cost sharing or match requirement. It's not a condition for eligibility. And it's, again, like I said, it'll be considered during evaluation, and your budget will be submitted during your final application. But it is something to think about when you're starting with the pre-application, just considering what you will want to use your funds for based on what costs are allowable. So check the RFA for more details on costs that are allowable. Yeah, so there's a big list of allowable costs. And just another thing to note is that we don't want to double count or supplicate other project efforts that are funded through other federal programs. So just to make sure that you're keeping those things separated, different projects separated. Let's see. Okay, so really quick, let's walk through how you'll find the webpage. If you go to our homepage here, you'll go under what we do, all the way down to water, and then at the bottom there is the historically underserved farmer to farmer outreach program. When you click that, you'll see the homepage. Right here where I have it circled is the request for applications. And in the request for applications, there are a couple of appendices, which includes a list of all the counties for all the geographies, including our partners. There's a pre-application preview and a full application preview. So if you want to get an idea of what will be required for the pre-application before you go into the online portal, you can do that by looking at the appendices on the RFA. There's a couple other resources here. One to definitely know is the frequently asked questions page. You might want to check that before you reach out with questions, but I'm happy to answer any and all questions regardless, but that's probably a helpful resource. And if you scroll down on the web page, you can't see it here, but there's links to our other project partners. web pages if you're interested in seeing their programs based on their geographies. And then the online application form is this button here circled in red. And so you'll have to go through that form in order to submit the application. Again, if you'd like to look at what the questions will be, it's available in the RFA before you go in and submit it through here. There is an option to save and continue as you're working on it, so you don't have to complete it all at once. So when you click this button, it'll take you to our form stack application form. And this is just kind of like a preview of what it looks like. It's pretty straightforward. There's some text boxes you'll have to complete. Some have character limits, which is also listed in the RFA if you look at that application preview. So yeah, I think that covers it. I know I just dumped a lot of information. My name's Chloe Hundelt, and this is my contact information if you'd like to write that down, or again, you can access these slides on the homepage as well. But if there's any questions, now I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but otherwise that pretty much wraps it up. So I appreciate you sitting in on this webinar and hope it was informative.
Thanks, Chloe. Given the size of the attendance, I would say if people want to just ask their questions verbally, that will be fine.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, great. I hope that means I was just really thorough. But yeah, if I'm sure other questions will come up in the future, and that's you can reach out to me. So please do so. And yeah, I think I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope to hear from some of you soon.